Hey guys, my book is coming out today. It's super exciting. It's called Stories I Tell Myself, an anthology of unusual fiction, and that's exactly what it is. It's a short anthology of just 5 stories, and the link is in the description box below, and it's available on Amazon for download today. I feel this book is pretty self-explanatory. For the first book I'm releasing, stories that I've written to amuse just myself, and I've gone back to reread them many times over the years, and now I'm going to share them with all of you. So we're just going to read one story today. I wrote this in college after studying Stephen King for a long while. It's not really about Stephen King, obviously. It's just inspired by the concept of Stephen King, which I feel he would appreciate, and I hope you enjoy it. It's called The Typewriter. August 26th, 2007. Hello. Testing 1, 2, 3. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Sir, this is a very pivotal moment for me, and it's already going to shit. My psychiatrist thinks that by removing myself from the object I perceive to be the cause of my mental unrest, I am putting the emphasis on the object having the problem instead of recognizing it as my own. While that logic may make sense for other people, he is wrong. I haven't been sitting at this typewriter for 5 minutes, and already I can feel what he calls a writer thing. I feel safe again, whole again. My mind is calmer than anything any drug so far has produced. My fingers are falling comfortably onto the keys, like when you sink slowly into a favorite couch after a long absence. This is where it begins. It is not a writer thing. When a writer sits down to write without any idea what he or she is going to say, it can go any number of ways. There can be a lot of staring and blank paper and conserved ink. There can be a lot of bad beginnings, begun and ended. You can just start somewhere and go and go and go. But most of all, there's just a touch of anxiety, a familiar irritation, because the writer really doesn't know what's going to happen when he or she sits down to write. This feeling of being safe is not what a writer is supposed to feel. The familiar part should be the anxiety, not security. It's wrong. Nice and wrong. My psychiatrist sloughs it off as logical. He says I feel safe at this typewriter because I have written my fame by its keys. All of my record-breaking bestsellers have come from this typewriter, and so it makes sense, he says, that this typewriter would make me feel that I'm a whole person. It's what society has defined me by. And why is it so bad, he asks. Feeling safe is not what caused my breakdown. What caused my breakdown, he says, was an inability to keep in touch with reality. He thinks my talk of outward struggle with the typewriter is my mind's way of coping with my inner struggle. It's the kind of symbolism I've used before in my own writing. The concept is sound. The problem with all this is I wasn't crazy before this typewriter found me. Before fame, he corrects. Things didn't change color or disappear. I wasn't a slave to my work. I wasn't like this before. I don't care what my psychiatrist says. This is the final time I will use this typewriter. Again. August 27. That's the next day. 2007. My psychiatrist didn't agree with me when I told him that the positive effects of my short reunion with the typewriter were actually just proof of its negative overall effect. He says my time here with him has probably done me more good than I know. We call that arrogance where I come from. He refuses to let me use it just the once. Despite my best efforts, he does not believe one time is considered a breakthrough. He did say that if it made me feel better, he would have someone sit with me in the room when I use it. The result of this is Tom sitting in the corner with his placid smile. If Lola was on duty, I would write about her because Lola, with her full lips, full hips, and elegant lack of patience, is a character that writers wait their whole lives to meet in person just so they can write her down. But today all I have is Tom, and there is only so much one can say about a 22-year-old whose life ambition is to be a male nurse in a psychiatric facility. By telling my psychiatrist I had no desire to touch this typewriter again, nor any desire to write anything with it ever again in my life, all I have accomplished was a neat list of topics to discuss, as if a writer doesn't know how to fill in plot points. I picked the typewriter up at a garage sale outside Memphis. On our way to Graceland, a fluorescent pink poster with Sharpie-lettered directions caught my wife's eye, and we decided to explore. Yard sales were our thing, one of those spur-of-the-moment adventures that kept us from getting stale. The sale was run by an aging hound and his owner, a perfect example of pets who look like their owners and with their identically sagging ears and jowls. There was the usual garage sale junk you'd expect to find. The standard mugs with "Best Grandpa" and quip remarks about the irony of good mornings. The usual collection of rusted claw hammers and hand rakes, the bric-a-brac that older women pick through, hoping they'll find a sterling silver tea strainer among the plastic salad servers and bent soup spoons. My wife quickly lost herself in the record collection, while I wandered over to listen to a bickering couple. While my wife finds her treasures in the vinyl of the Stones, the Who, and the Jackson 5, I find mine in my fellow buyers. I've picked up several main characters at garage sales for a bargain price. They were fighting about whether their living room was really big enough to fit the coffee table that the young buck was intent on purchasing. The smoky brunette was intent on forgetting said table was ever created. I've been developing my public eavesdropping technique since I was a kid. It involves a certain amount of distance, an intense interest in an intricate item, and very good hearing. The most intricate item closest to the couple was, of course, the typewriter. I've always admired typewriters in general. They have a way of enticing everyone. The small child, the teenage cynic, the young businessman, the weary professional. Everyone likes typewriters. There aren't many things in this world that intrigue everyone. This makes typewriters the perfect item to hover around while listening to conversations. There was nothing special about this typewriter. It was nothing. It was old but functional, heavy but not awkward, solid but not stubborn. It had the same look to it that something does when it was once well loved and now spends most of its time wondering where the good old days have gone. It was certainly from the good old days, with the slightly rounded edges of the 50s, the angular font of the obsolete maker in metallic against the black face. In short, it looked innocent, and that should have tipped me off. Typewriters do not look innocent. They look sad. They're a relic of the past. They're fun to look at, interesting to play with, and there's not a person who doesn't love that satisfying clack of the keys and the ding at the end of the line. But no one buys them. They're old. They're useless. They take up valuable surface area. You practically have to relearn how to type to use one efficiently. I thought at the time I was being inspired by the bickering. I touched the keys, listening to the age-old argument, and I felt a story coming on. So I bought the typewriter. Maybe as a good luck charm, maybe to warm up the appearance of my office, maybe for a lot of half-finished reasons in the back of my head. Bottom line, I bought it. Bottom line, I used it to write my entire collection of horror suspense novels that have since become the cornerstone of pulp fiction in America today, or so critics say. Bottom line, it's evil. Bottom line, that's at the bottom of the page. It's very cool. September 29, 2007. That's a month. It's pathetic how well acts of desperation work. It's downright depressing how badly they don't. I'm back, if you hadn't noticed. My psychiatrist claims my second suicide attempt merely set me back. It didn't alter my treatment. Frustrating, let me tell you. Tom is back in his corner looking just exactly the same as he did when we last spoke. He's wearing his pink scrubs today, the ones with the perfectly square tear in the corner of the shirt, and his Regulation Anonymous white sneakers. He's good at faking it. He's got his pearly whites displayed, and he doesn't flinch or show any sign of pity for me when he sees me again. He just smiles his good buddy smile and tells me he's glad to see me again. His corner is the one with the door in it over to my left. The only thing the last month earned me was my right to pick the way the room is set up. It's a good room for this type of thing. It's sparse. The tiny blue tiles and the blank walls of the same hue. The cold that can only come from being in a basement. This room is empty now, except for the two chairs, mine and Tom's. The typewriter sits on its own table. Simple, safe. I am not crazy. I know that I'm the unreliable narrator and that you're tempering my words carefully, because why else would I talk as if an inanimate object had intentions of its own? Why else would I be in a psychiatric facility? It's ironic, really, but no one took me seriously before I came here. People don't tend to listen on the outside when you tell them that an inanimate object is taking back things it allegedly gave you, or that it's punishing you for your success. You're stressed, they say. It's all this fame finally getting to you, they say. They say a lot of things, but they don't listen. Not really. It seems obvious to me that a person who has always been responsible doesn't start placing blame at random, least of all on an object. Nor does he develop the sudden compulsion to retype manuscripts he has lost not one but all the drafts for. I needed to get away from it. Irony again. Acts of desperation work so well for a time. Time is up. September 31st, that's 2 days later, 2007. My psychiatrist tells me that people do not think I'm crazy. I think I'm crazy. If I didn't, he reasons, I would not have come here. His reasoning would make sense if I were Jack, who claims to be normal while he uses push pins to enhance the pads of his fingers. I am not mistaken when I tell you I am quite sane. See, it turns red. I will have you note, since this is a speaking version of this, the typeface is still black, so you make your own decisions. See, it turns red. The ink turns red when you get to the good part. It always has. It starts just like that, with the vowels or the punctuation from the first short story I wrote to the last bestseller that made it out of the house. The ink turned red when I got to the guts of the piece. When Danya finally cracks and causes not just her parents, but the entirety of her family reunion to spontaneously combust. When the demon that Jillian summoned to avenge her murdered son turns on her in the end and rips her soul from her body. When Josh Gleason hunts down and dismembers every member of the KKK in his hometown that lynched the African-American love of his life, the ink turned red before it faded into black. It wasn't a ribbon malfunction. The first time it happened, I ordered a new one, and it was a hassle. The thing is so old. I had to get a local ancient mechanic to figure out what modern size would fit. Days later, when I returned to the climax, the ink turned red before it faded to black. Then I made my wife come and watch me type. Nothing happened. It was just black. I laughed it off as a trick of the light, shrugged my shoulders, and blamed my eyes. But it wasn't the light, and it wasn't my eyes. Full pages can stay red for days before fading to black if there's enough gore in it. I let it go. I figured there was something in the machine that got loose if you typed too hard or too fast, or maybe the dye from the pads of the letters got weak and bled. Maybe it was in my head that thinking about blood made me see red. I made excuses for the thing. I was making enough money to support my family. I had nothing to complain about. Even when things got weirder, it was bearable. It wasn't my problem specifically when my editor called me up, because my manuscripts, I'm sorry, I missed a line. It wasn't my problem specifically when my editor called me up and asked me what kind of paper I was using. He tells me he's wondering because my manuscripts smell like something rotting. I've talked to the mailroom, he said. I've talked to the post office, he said. It's got to be the paper. It remained a mystery because I wasn't doing anything to the paper. I typed it up on the typewriter, put it in its stack, and sent it to New York. I even made the trip down to the Big Apple to witness it for myself, and sure enough, it smelled like rotting flesh upon its arrival. I tried retyping full manuscripts onto a computer, printing it out, and sending those pages, but the same thing happened. Color-changing ink that only I noticed, and an inexplicable smell several states to the south of me were somewhat offbeat, but still the books were selling like hotcakes and my wife was by my side. If it had stopped there, everything would have stayed that way. Then it turned on me. October 2nd, 2007. So it's like 5 days later? My psychiatrist is pleased with what he calls progress. I've started to get it out, he says, and that can only be good. Yes, my typing is a step in the right direction, he says. Getting into another rhythm with this thing is what I call regression. It's just like the last time. Everything feels fine now, but I can feel it coming. Everything will be fine until it's not. It's just like before. Around the time of the smelly paper caper, I began having problems of my own. The first time it happened, it was just a letter. I was typing up a second draft, and there was a space where an A should have been, leaving 3 spaces between 2 words. It was easily passable as a mistake in the heat of the moment, but then it was more than a letter in a manuscript, more than one on a page. Then it was words, then paragraphs, then pages, then whole chapters. There would just be blank spaces, blank pages, blank stacks, blank, blank, blank. I would return from lunch and everything I had written during the morning would have vanished. The piles of paper would always remain where I had left them, but the pages that the piles were made up of were virginal. That's when it all started to fall apart. I knew it was the typewriter somehow. I just knew in my gut that it was the typewriter. I tried to use my computer to write out my books, even just to brainstorm, but none of it was any good. I was agitated with the keys, with the rhythm of typing. I didn't feel the satisfaction I felt with the typewriter. I needed the strong clack to the fall of the keys, a confident ding at the end of the line. I could have ignored the red. It wasn't the ink, and it wasn't the smell. It was the missing pieces, then the missing holes. I could write all day and just have nothing to show for it. I stopped leaving my desk. I sat there once for a week, testing my wife to the limit by living on energy drinks, coffee, and whatever food she brought me. I wrote until I finished my draft, and without hesitating, I stuffed it into a box and sent it immediately overnight delivery to New York. The box arrived to my publisher, full of nothing but ash. It was starting to second-guess my worthiness. Betrayal on the deepest level. I became frantic, trying to prove myself. I retyped the manuscript from my earliest draft, filling in all the blanks that seemed to have lengthened in my absence. In my panic to improve it somehow, I added an entirely unnecessary layer of allegory to the already complex storyline. It arrived in New York whole because I delivered it myself. When I returned home, I barely reunited with my wife before heading to my office and writing 3 chapters of 3 separate possible storylines. I left all 3 on my desk, hoping to come back and find one selected for me. When I returned, they were all pristine. Elated, I picked up the one I favored and wrote for hours, feeling like I was finding my rhythm again. I went to sleep, woke up, ate breakfast with my wife for the first time in ages, and returned to my typewriter. The pages were blank. I rewrote it better this time, I promised myself, or the typewriter, and spent hours on just a few pages, striking through most of the words, trying to tease out the perfect combination of phrases, all for naught. It went on this way for months. My life became one frantic attempt after another to gain some ground, make some headway, to finish something, anything, even when there wasn't a deadline. It was beyond obsession. It was beyond addiction. It was my lifeblood, my pulse, and the only reason I would get out of bed and the only reason I could come up with to sleep. If I did not sleep, I would not be awake enough, sharp enough, ready enough to try again. They say the more time you spend on your career, the worse your home life becomes. When my wife left, I knew it was the end. Knowing you're not crazy should be a comfort to you when things happen that you can't explain. It wasn't. Being crazy would mean it could be fixed. You can't fix something if there isn't a problem. I knew it was the typewriter, but I couldn't stop coming back to it. Couldn't stop forgiving it for putting me through this. Couldn't stop believing I could win it over again. It just seemed so innocent. But typewriters are not innocent. They're sad, they're old, lonely, and useless. They are never innocent. The end. I think if you're gonna ask me, which you may be, I think it works better when you put the red in. So I've done it both ways. I've printed it with red in all the appropriate places. And I think when you finish it in red, because the way that I usually finish it is the last line is fully in red. But if you do that, you're relying so much on something else other than the writing. And what I really, in the end, always love about this is his personality. He's such a pain in the butt. Like, this has really nothing to do with anything I actually know or don't know about Stephen King. But this character, who just generally is a very successful horror writer, is sort of a sarcastic jerk, right? And when I add the red in, even though I think it gives a closure to the concept, right? Because if I'm telling you it stays red, then he's not crazy, it is the typewriter. But by doing that, I think it takes something away from his voice. And so for this edition, I did not have it go red. And I go back and forth on this all the time, and I've gone back and forth on this many times. So anyway, this is just one of the 5 short stories in my anthology that dropped today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you'd like more stories, more drafts, more whatever, let me know below. Like and subscribe for more content. buy that book if you can, and have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for staying all the way to the end.